y'all, and welcome to another exciting episode of Down Home Dirt, the show where we dive deep into the journey of entrepreneurship with those who took the plunge and all the ups and downs that come with it. I'm your host, Dusta, and today we're joined with Sandra Bowman with Designated Bookkeeping LLC. Welcome, and thanks for coming out today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to learn more about you because bookkeeping is something that I did when I was in high school, and I ended up getting like a little certificate of completion essentially. And I just kind of fell in love with the process back then. So I can't wait to learn more about you and what you do.
That's neat that they taught it in high school. Like, they should do more of that now.
I agree 100%. It was a dual enrollment program, and I got to go for, I think it was called accounting operations, but essentially it was bookkeeping in the end. And we learned Peachtree and typing and QuickBooks and how everything works. And it was really cool.
So neat. That is so neat.
I thought for a long time I wanted to be an accountant, and then I started taking accounting courses, and I was like, I can't do this. So I switched real quick.
Yeah. I started out, I was a foster child, and that was my original path, was to become an accountant. But I had to grow up pretty quick. So I, work or go to school, and I was young, not making smart choices. So, I decided to work and make money. So I ended up taking a less traditional route. But when I did start college and start to go to classes and the accounting classes, and it didn't make any sense to me. I was thinking, I thought it was all about math, I loved math. And so, yeah, I took a backwards approach to it and ended up where I wanted to be anyway.
I feel that. I do my own bookkeeping now for my business, and I'm really thankful that I have the knowledge, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it where it needs to go, and then I hand it to my accountant. Here you go. Thank you.
Right.
So let's get to know each other a little bit better. So where are you from, and how did you end up in the Triangle?
Well, I was born and raised here in Raleigh. There was a portion, of my life when I was a tween where we lived in Georgia, but then we moved back to Raleigh. And so I've just stuck around, as an adult. I lived in Knightdale for 15 years. And then now we live in Wendell on the Johnston County side.
It's a very up and coming community. So you picked really well. I love the little Wendell Falls area. It's my favorite.
Oh, yeah, I do too. When we moved out here, though, Wendell Falls, they had stopped building it at one point because the housing market crashed and stuff. So we lived in the neighborhood that was attached kind of to that area, Rutledge Landing. And we lived there for 15 years. And then that's when we moved out this way when the kids were little.
It's a nice area to raise kids. That's another reason why I came here, because I want to make sure my kids were raised in a more wholesome environment. I don't know what's a nice way of saying that, but I'm from Sarasota, Florida. It's not for kids.
Yeah. We moved for better schools. My kids now go to it's like a choice school. They don't go to the regular schools that are down the street. My daughter's in the early college, and then my son's on the path to go to the early college. So
that's awesome. Congratulations. Let's jump into your journey and how you became the designated bookkeeper. Can you tell us about your journey into becoming the bookkeeper, and was there a defining moment that led you down this path?
Well, I was a bookkeeper for a local dentist office, and I was there for about 7 years, and I lost my job. Before that, I was in banking, and I worked for a local bank for about 10 years, but the dentist office took a chance on me and let me come in. And so I worked there for 7 years. When I lost my job, it was heartbreaking because I thought I was this amazing bookkeeper and that I knew everything. I'm so smart. I'm going to get this job. Come to find out that bookkeeping wasn't what I thought it was. I was merely just a data entry clerk, like a hyped up data entry clerk. And I didn't know what I thought I knew about bookkeeping. So from there, best thing that ever happened to me, a local nonprofit took me in, and I started going to bookkeeping classes at the same time. The CFO kind of held me under her arm, and taking bookkeeping classes at Wake Tech. And about a year in, the CFO decided she wanted to retire. She didn't want to do this anymore. It was too much stress. But working for a nonprofit, they have like budgets and they can't really hire who they need for that role. So what happened was I ended up kind of taking her place. Of course, I'm not an accountant. By this point, a year under my belt, I've learned so much. And this is where it kind of clicked for me with accounting. Like you're always learning. After she left and they didn't replace her, I went to the board and kind of convinced them to let me hire on my accounting teacher as, consultant. And so for 3 years, I worked side by side with my accounting teacher. And just to thank the opportunity that I had to learn, it was just like amazing, that I went from being, this data entry clerk to just like growing substantially, just having my accounting teacher there with me, you know, answering any questions that I had, always looking behind my work. And then also the experience that I got in nonprofit accounting, which is different than just regular small business accounting, just because they have to track grants and the reports for the board. It's just a little bit different.
Next question. Let's talk about myth busting. What's one common myth about bookkeeping or finance that you'd like to debunk for our listeners?
Well, I feel like you kind of know where I'm going to go with this because, again, I was this awesome bookkeeper, and it turns out I was just a data entry clerk, which gives people the impression that they can just hire anybody. Your wife could do the books, your husband could do the books, you can hire Vanessa down the street for $15 an hour. And that, yes, anybody can do data entry, but bookkeeping is more than that. And unless you have the accounting principles knowledge and really know what happens behind the scenes, you really need to have that bookkeeper on hand. Your books could get so messed up if you just put anybody on it and they don't know what increases your assets and what's increased by a credit, what's increased by a debit. If you don't know that, then your books could be in jeopardy.
Absolutely agree with you on that. That is something that my current accountant actually mentioned to me whenever we first met. She was like, do I need to go through and look and make sure that everything is where it needs to be? And I was like, absolutely go for it, because even though I have a background, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm perfect either. So
Right.
making sure that they're, checked by somebody who knows those things is very important.
Yeah. I mean, most of the clients I get are, when I first get them, they're cleanups. They came from somebody else was doing their books. Bookkeeping's not regulated, so really anybody can become a bookkeeper. So, I mean, I've even gotten books from other companies that are bookkeeping companies and had to clean up after them. So, yeah, it's really dangerous.
It is. That's interesting. We're going to dive into that later about why it's not regulated, but moving on. For entrepreneurs, what are the top 3 bookkeeping tips that you wish everyone knew before starting their business?
So, one of the top ones is to keep your personal and your business finances separate. A lot of business owners first starting out, they might commingle the funds, and that takes away your protections in business. Definitely need to keep your personal with your personal and your business with your business. Don't mix those. Another one I'm going to say is investing in that bookkeeper. It may be something that you think you don't have the budget for, but believe me, the small fee that you're going to pay per month, which of course as a new business owner you're thinking that's expensive, is going to save you time and money in the future hiring somebody to come and clean it up. It also saves you time in your business, instead of spending the time in the bookkeeping, taking you away from what you do best with your business. It saves you time there. I compare it to when I started out, I needed a new website. Could I have done that? Yes, I could have learned it. I could have spent an awful lot of time on it, but I chose to outsource that and hire the professionals so I could spend more time on my business and growing my business. So that's another one. And, keep your receipts for everything. Set up a file system if you have Google Workspace or Microsoft. Set up a file for each vendor and keep your receipts for everything. And if you invest in a software like QuickBooks or Xero, FreshBooks, you can attach those receipts to each expense. If you're ever audited, it's already there.
That's my favorite feature. I have QuickBooks myself, and I'm like, take a picture. I have it. It's there. We have proof.
Do you use that function in QuickBooks where it's on the receipts tab and you have a specialized email that you can forward your receipts from QuickBooks to this email? And then from there, you just create the bill or match it to an already recorded expense or bill.
I did not know it did that, actually.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. I even do that for my books. As soon as I get an email for a receipt that I have, especially for all my recurring, I just go ahead and forward it to that customized email. And then you can create it right then instead of waiting.
That's a great tip. Thank you. I appreciate that. That is a really good
Yeah,
tip. I didn't even know it did that.
yeah.
So I guess that leads us into our next question. Are there any tech tools or software that you swear by that make bookkeeping easier, and why do you love them?
I love QuickBooks. I say QuickBooks is like the iPhone for accounting. Like iPhone's so easy, user friendly. It has icons for everything. Um, you know, I just love it. So that's one. Some of the other things I use are specific to accountants, but like for entrepreneurs, Google Workspace. I love Google Workspace. I use that. I've invested in Grammarly. I have this math mind, and when I'm trying to communicate sometimes to customers, it's all over the place. So I've invested the Grammarly. I type in there what I want to say, and then I let it review what I'm going to say to make it more understandable. I have this, I have for me that other, just entrepreneurs wouldn't get. I use this app called Keeper app, and it attaches to my clients' QuickBooks accounts. And it makes it easier for me to see clients' accounts at a top level overview and make changes right there. And it has some reporting that QuickBooks doesn't have that I like a lot. So I use that too. So my customers can get this specialized reporting that I get from Keeper software. And then another thing that I use, which other professions can keep it in mind too. I don't think that it's specific to accounting, but if it is, I'm sure there's other softwares like it. There's it's called Anchor, And that's what I use for invoicing, because invoicing costs so much, in merchant fees. I only have to pay $5 per customer payment um, to process my fees. And so I love that too.
That's awesome. That's really awesome because I've thought for literal years, I won't take credit cards. I won't take any type of online payments because I didn't want to pay the fees. And so I didn't
Yeah,
realize that there was a way to kind of circumvent paying all of that.
yeah. So that that's what I use for that, and I just pay $5 per customer. So if your bill's $250, I pay $5. If it's 5,000, I pay $5.
That is awesome. I'm so excited. I'm gonna check that out later because now I'm curious. So I know we talked a little bit before the podcast about what's the most creative or unusual way you've seen a business owner manage their finances. And one of the ones that I just wanted to share, and we talked about it, it's a red flag. But at the time, I was like, this seems a little, I didn't really see it, was instead of using a program that's catered to it, using like Microsoft Excel or a notebook, which I know we used to have general ledgers back in the day. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about just like a notebook.
Yeah. So there's a difference in small business owners starting out and using their notebook or their Excel spreadsheet, and as long as they're capturing everything. But if a bookkeeper that you're paying X amount of dollars, doesn't want to use the software and they're just trying to draw everything out in an Excel workbook or a notebook, that's I feel like that's a red flag. I'm sure that somebody out there could do it and is old school, but just the time, and I don't know. I feel like it could possibly be a red flag if you're hiring a bookkeeper to take over your books and they don't trust the technology that's out there for us to streamline everything.
I agree with you on that because the thing that I love about QuickBooks, so this is just totally not paid promotion, guys, but the fact that like my accountant can log in and see everything she can do it remotely. And so if something is like a miss or whatever, it's like she can handle it. It's not like I have to take the book or I have to take the thing into her, the floppy drive, floppy. Wow. How old am I? I mean, USB drive. I can't believe I
Yeah.
just said that. I'm old school. I remember when we
Well,
had floppy disks.
I know. Well, and if somebody's keeping it in a spreadsheet, again, if you're a small business owner and you're just starting out, I understand trying to make things simple and keep it in a spreadsheet. But if a paid bookkeeper is doing that, like, what about all the different ledgers that you're affecting? Are you just recording income and expense? What about your assets? What about your liability, your loans, your property? How are you keeping track of when you reconcile the bank accounts? Like, there's so much that goes on in bookkeeping. I don't know how somebody would keep track of that on a spreadsheet.
I agree. That's why I love QuickBooks and everything's in there and I don't have to think about it. And then I just do the P&L. Good to go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my favorite one,
Um,
P&L.
and there's also, if somebody's not interested in QuickBooks, there's Zero that's coming around. And then there's FreshBooks. There's a couple other too, but those are the three main ones that I usually work with.
Yeah, back in the day, and I say that like it was 100 years ago, but it was like 20 years ago, I learned Peachtree, and that was the most annoying program, I'm going to be honest, to learn. And I was like, I don't get it. I'm done. I can't do this.
Yeah. I can't say that I've had experience with Peachtree. I've had some with Sage Intact, and that one was a little bit more difficult to learn, but generally that's bigger businesses in that system.
That's probably
And
why okay. That makes sense now.
yeah, yeah. So,
Can you share a success story where good bookkeeping turned a struggling business around?
well, you have a local business, and I'm not saying, I'm just using local, a small business where, you know, their books were a mess, and they weren't properly keeping track of their income and expenses, um, their sales tax payments. So they didn't have the visibility that they needed to make purchases, to keep track of inventory. So that's when they hire me, and I come in and I get the expenses in there, I get the income recorded. That, especially if you're using other systems to take your money, um, that include merchant fees. Some bookkeepers and customers have the habit of just adding the the bottom line number to the books and not grossing it up. So they're just adding the net amount. And so you're not getting all the fees, refunds, everything included in that. So again, getting the income, adding the inventory to QuickBooks, reconciling that inventory. And we were able to find losses and recoup those losses going back to a whole year, that they didn't know that they were losing. And so we were able to get that taken care of in QuickBooks. I was able to locate that down, and they were able to get some of their money back because it was inventory that they weren't keeping track of. So that was it saved them a lot of money. So
That's so true, though. Like, as a business owner, you don't think about the different things, like fees, interest, the credit card. It is so much. I'm getting overwhelmed just thinking about it. And you're right, because when you go to file your tax, you have to like write that stuff like this is where all the money went. It's very
yeah,
important.
yeah,
And like sometimes when you miss that, it looks like either you don't know what you're doing in business, right? Because you've got all these fees that you're not accounting for. So they're like, why are you not making money? This is why.
right, right.
So, what is the most common bookkeeping mistake that you see entrepreneurs make, and how can they avoid it?
I think when they commingle their business and personal, that happens a lot, and just simply avoiding mixing it together, making sure that you have that separate checking account for personal and business. They make a mistake a lot of thinking that all their business meals are deductible, and that is not the case either. You have 100% deductible meals and 50% deductible meals, and the majority of those meals fall under the 50% deductible. And even then, you need to be, you can't just expense it. Do you have a log of what you talked about during this business expense? um it's just not so easy as just expensing a meal.
Yes, my mom, when she had a housekeeping company, like this was 20 years ago, she would take everybody out and she would buy them food. She would go through the drive-through on her way to work, and she was just like, business expense, business. We know why now she's no longer in business. I learned a lot of what not to do. But that was one of the things that I'm like, you can't just go through the drive-through and be like, business expense, like you gotta, it's more than that.
Yeah, just because I've worked through lunch and I'm starving come 3 o'clock, I can't order pizza to my house and claim that as a business expense. um it just doesn't work that way.
No, the things I've learned in life by others' experiences, I could write a book. I probably should, honestly.
Yeah, that would be funny.
So, keeping it fun, bookkeeping can sound dry. What's one way that you make it fun for your clients?
Oh Lord, I don't know if I make it fun per se. Maybe just more understandable, you know, but fun. Can bookkeeping be fun? I'm such a nerd that I love bookkeeping puns, so I can hit you up with a good bookkeeping pun. Um, that's about as fun as it gets. It's fun to me. I love it. I have a good time. I love working with small businesses and nonprofits. giving them that insight and making sure that they understand what they're looking at and can make decisions based off of that. I guess that's not a good answer, but
That's a great answer because honestly, you're right. It's a very stressful thing, especially when you're managing all facets of your business. You're just like, okay, like now they've come to you and they're like, this is the fun part. I get to understand and learn and know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. So that's just my two
yeah,
cents.
and use that information to make decisions, but you're outsourcing that work to me, the knowledge to me. It's my job to know and you know do with it what bookkeepers do with it. But then because you've outsourced it to me, you can now focus on your business and do all the fun stuff that you can do to grow your business and plan for your business. So
I agree. I think hiring a professional is like super important when it comes to things like that, bookkeeping, because of the way that I run my business. But if I could just give that to someone else, that would be phenomenal. That's 10 more hours of my life back, not counting mileage, not making sure that I match transactions, not making sure that I didn't do something stupid.
right. Yeah, like that 10 hours of work, yes, you can do it, but it's like priceless and what it gives to you, your time back in your business.
And to know that a professional is taking care of it and I don't have to double check it or anything. I love that. So I love what you do. Much respect to you.
Thank you.
So, how do you see the future of bookkeeping evolving with new technologies and trends in entrepreneurship?
Well, there's talk about bookkeepers maybe losing their job to AI, but AI is never going to replace bookkeeping. Even the financial softwares, they try to incorporate AI, and is nothing that you can really rely on at this point. You don't get that personal touch to it. You don't get that person thinking out of the box. How did this end up like this? And how are we going to fix it? I just don't think, yes, it can help and it can make things better, but to replace bookkeepers, they just recently had that financial software go out of business because it relied heavily on AI use for a few years, and it ended up going out of business. Now, eventually, I can't remember if it was a month later, a couple of weeks later, another company ended up buying that company. But for a while there, it was out of business completely because that's what it did. Instead of having bookkeepers, it just had AI do the bookkeeping for customers. So.
I'm a fan of AI and only for the ability to organize my thoughts and not necessarily to run my business. I'll like type in a prompt and I'll be like, make all of this make sense. And then it like gives me a whole thing that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, perfect. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say. But I think it
Yeah,
needs to
I
my
do that too. But even then, sometimes, like, it spits out some stuff that is like ridiculous, or is, and sometimes it spits out stuff if you ask it, to find an answer. You can't just rely on AI. Then you have to double check the answer that AI gave you to make sure that it's right, because even then, half the times it's not correct. So, yes, it's a tool that can help you, but to take over completely is nothing that I'm worried about taking over my job. No.
What advice would you give an entrepreneur who feels overwhelmed by their financials?
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would say reach out to your local bookkeeper. Most of us give free diagnostics, if not free, a cheap fee. And even, for instance, if you don't sign with me, I can still take that time to review your books with you and tell you, what you need to focus on, what needs that extra touch, what you've missed. I can look at that and give that to you so that you can then decide what you're going to do with that information. So it doesn't hurt to set that appointment. It doesn't hurt to ask questions. That's what we're here for. I'm in the business because I'm really passionate about small businesses, and I want you to be able to make those sound decisions for your business. So that's what I'm here for. I want to help you. And besides a bookkeeper, utilize your local programs. So your local small business center. Um, your They provide coaching. Even in Johnston County, how they have the different entrepreneurship programs. I'm a part of Launch JOCO right now. I was accepted into the current cohort. And the coaching that's provided in that is invaluable. Our teacher is amazing. And, so just use your local programs. Apply for grants. The worst that happens is they say no, so.
It's great. I'm so excited that you're in Launch JOCO. That is one of my favorite programs. I didn't actually go through it, but I learned about it over the summer. And I love that there are so many resources here, and specifically in Johnston County, for you that are free to help launch your business, to help grow your business, to, like you said, maybe take inventory and reevaluate and make sure you're doing the things that are correct.
Yeah, it's an amazing program. And our teacher, she's the icing on the cake. We have weekly homework, and in my homework, the feedback that she gives to me, I just cannot thank this program enough. I think more people should, see what their local programs are. The launch program, I think, is nationwide, so if you're not in Johnston County, look for Wake County or your city, or just see, because it is really invaluable. The success stories coming out of that program are amazing.
Absolutely. And there is programs all over the United States. You have to just go to launchmycity.com, I believe it is, and then
Yeah.
put it in.
Yeah.
Because I did that just for funsies. I did that where I'm from, and the nearest program to where I'm from is about 4.5 hours north. And I was like, oh, okay. So even though Florida is like this huge, progressive place, like there's still things that they lack that Johnston County has.
Right.
So I was actually really surprised. I was like, oh, wow, okay.
But if the right people got a hold of that information and they wanted to build upon that program, they could bring it closer to that area.
Yes, and I hope that they do. I know that there's a lot more, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like programs essentially in different areas, depending on where you're at. So
Yeah.
maybe they should get a launch Sarasota.
Because even without launch, sometimes from the small business center, I get emails from lawyers. Any questions you want to ask, we're going to have a lunch and learn, a month from now. Do you want to attend? Like, use the free resources that your area is offering. It'll help so much.
Absolutely. If it wasn't for the small business center at Johnston County, I would not be where I'm at today, because I had an idea to start a business, but I had no idea what the laws were, where to start, what I needed to, nothing. So I made an appointment, and I go in there, and they gave me a step-by-step thing. They went over my business plan. They were like, here's where you need to go next. Here. And I was like, I was in business within a month. I was like, this is perfect. And then I went and did a couple of free bookkeeping courses just to brush up, because it had been a while, and highly recommend.
Yeah.
So next up is the hot seat questions.
Okay. I'm so nervous. Okay.
All right. Hot seat rapid fire. So first question, quick. What's the first thing you do when you start working with a new client?
I have that initial meeting with them. So I have that initial meeting. I find out what their pain points are. But then the most important thing that I do is, before I take you on as a client, I do that diagnostic review. And that's when I do that deep dive of your books to find out what it is that's going on in there. And I can guarantee you that whoever you are, whoever was doing your books, bookkeepers aren't perfect. Even if you had this amazing bookkeeper, there's some things that can be reviewed, and I call it a cleanup. So
Ooh, I like it. Question 2. What's one business expense that you think is overrated or often misused by entrepreneurs?
that meals expense, we were talking about that. I should have saved that for this question. Folks, meals aren't deductible like you think they are. Keep your receipts if you're meeting somebody to talk. Like, let's say that we did this in a cafe instead. Yes, that could be deductible. And, we have the footage. Did we keep a log of, some business questions that, we went over with each other? Maybe I helped you with your bookkeeping. You helped me with my marketing. Make sure you're keeping those meeting minutes too with your receipts. Everything is not deductible like you think it is.
You're absolutely right. I so, Question number 3, biggest red flag. What's the biggest red flag that you look for when reviewing a client's financial records?
Oh, there's so many, and I don't want to get this question wrong. Like other people listening, why didn't she think of this? But off the top of my head, I think, you know, all the focus that most people know about is on the profit and loss statement or the income statement. You know, that balance sheet. Is there a huge balance and opening balance equity? That's just an account that QuickBooks created that ends up being this clearing account that doesn't get cleared out. You know, was there a loan for your asset that you purchased? Is the principal getting added to the balance sheet and the interest being expensed out on your income statement? When was the last time your accounts were reconciled? Sometimes people think that just because they're keeping track of it, especially in systems like QuickBooks and Zero, FreshBooks, you can just hit add or match. They think that they're keeping track of it on that screen, but have you really went in there and reconciled your books? Made sure that all the transactions are there. And if you haven't, make sure you look into doing that, because you'll be surprised what you can find. All those uncleared transactions. Is undeposited funds huge?
Yes, I went through like a whole thing. I think it was last year with undeposited funds, and I was just like, oh. So I spent like hours making sure that I had gone through and made sure everything was good. That was so
Yeah.
frustrating.
Right.
I think everyone who starts doing their own books is like, F this at some point. It just took me a little bit longer than others.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the best kept secret. What's one bookkeeping secret that all entrepreneurs should know that could save them time or money?
Me. No.
That's a good answer.
It's really worth your time to invest in a bookkeeper, somebody that knows what they're doing. That we talked about, that time that they can save you is invaluable to your business. The outsourced bookkeeping to individuals like me, yes, it comes with a fee. Some people have minimum fees, some people charge by hour. In the long run, it's cheaper than hiring somebody minimum wage to do your books who may or may not know what you're doing, what they're doing. You know, it's cheaper to pay that small fee to us to work on your books 5-10 hours a month than to pay somebody full time or even part time 20 hours a week. So
It's an expensive cleanup,
it is an expensive cleanup, and the longer you wait, the more expensive it is.
especially if you have to amend a tax return. Oh, that is not fun.
Yes, that is not fun.
So let's talk nerd talk now. What's your favorite financial term or jargon that you think everyone needs to understand?
Well, I think in my head, I think that everybody knows what I'm talking about, but know that your profit and loss statement is where your income and your expenses are kept. Everything else falls on your balance sheet, and that's where your bank accounts, your land, your property, if it's involved with your business, right? I don't have any land on my balance sheet. I don't have cars on my balance sheet. Your loans. Um, I think that people, it would help them to know what's happening on their profit and loss statement versus their balance sheet. So.
I will agree with you on that because I always like to make sure I do. My QuickBooks won't let me look at my profit and loss statement unless every transaction is categorized and everything is done. I don't know if that's like a new feature or not, but I always try to go look at it and it's like, we can't show you no information because you didn't do the work. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
So let's talk about advice for your younger self. If you could give yourself one piece of financial advice, what would it be?
Well, I think, going back to young me who thought it was more important to make money, you know, than actually go to school. I kind of didn't have a choice, but I think I should have focused more on going to school in the beginning. I might would have ended up where I am just a lot sooner with the understanding. It's really, it's shiny and new to kids when they think, if I work full time at this job and I'm making whatever money, like I can make all this money now, but then you hit a wall and you're stuck there. And it's so hard to grow from that spot. If I didn't have so many people who believed in me and invested in me, and if I didn't push so hard to learn, I would still be in that spot. So I think that's invest in your education, try to learn. If you can't go to school, if you can't afford it, there's so many free programs out there. Again, with your small business center, Verizon has a free program right now. you know Google has a program. All these places have these free programs that you just need to research it and invest in yourself. Never stop learning. If you think that you know everything in the subject, whatever it is, bookkeeping, marketing, whatever it is, you don't know everything. um, Research that, and you'll come to find out that there's always learning to do.
You're absolutely true. Just a fun story, a little side quest, ADHD. When I was 17, I worked at a movie theater and these older people came in and I was the ticket girl, right? And so I don't know why, but it just something came over me and I asked them, are you guys students? And they were like, well, we're students of life. And I don't know why that has stuck with me my entire life, but I always think about how I'm constantly a student of life. I'm always going to learn. I'm never going to say I know everything because it's just not a thing. Unless you ask me about raising my own children, I know everything, but that's as far as it goes. But I'm
I
sure
don't.
there's things I don't know, and that's okay. And whatever.
Yeah. Well, like I tell my kids, like I'm always growing as a parent. You know, the same thing with that. I'm always growing and learning and adapting. When they are hit middle school, it gets so hard, because you go from the age where they're relying on you and you're their moon and their stars, and now all of a sudden, skirt, you're not anymore. And it takes a minute to adapt to your new role in parenting. You know, it's hard for a minute there until you get back on track and adapt your parenting. That's for sure.
And then they want to switch it up on you in ninth grade, and you're like, wait a second.
I know. So far, the middle school years were the hardest for me.
I will agree with you on that. We talked beforehand, and obviously, I have two grown children, and middle school was really hard for my son. And my daughter, it was hard because her intellectual capabilities were far beyond what she was dealing with in school. And so I actually ended up homeschooling her from 6th grade all the way through high school because it just wasn't enough stimulation. It sucked for her. But my son's challenges were socialization and other children and learning how to deal with that. I mean, there were times when he would get in fights with kids. It's funny now, but it was not funny at the time.
Yeah.
Some kid said something to him. I don't remember if it was about his mom or his sister, and he gets up and he throws a biscuit at this kid. And I was like, "Bro, you can't like throw food." He got suspended and it was a whole thing. I had to go to the school, but I was like, people are going to say things and you're just going to have to ignore it.
Yeah.
But it's the biscuit now. He threw the biscuit, he missed the kid, then he went and he tried to pick up a trash can and throw it, and he still missed.
Oh no.
I love my son, but he is not athletic. And I just was like, could you imagine if he threw a punch? He
Yeah. Yeah. I
I love
think the hard part for me was just how they needed me and then they didn't anymore. And, stepping back to let them make their own decisions and, you know,
I will say that is the hardest part of parenting is having to step back. My 18-year-old daughter now, she'll say things to me like, "Why do you treat me like I'm so stupid?" And I was like, "It's not that. It's that you've always, in my opinion, been the person I need to like teach how to life, right?" So I've just never turned that off. So it's not that you're stupid. It's just that I'm like, oh, well, maybe she doesn't know this about life.
well, and also that, like, we went through it too. Like, I know we seem like your parents, but it wasn't that long ago that I was your age and I went through it too. And I'm just trying to save you all the heartbreak and crazy decisions. But I've learned that, you got to make your own. So,
And then just hope and pray that they are okay. I know.
yeah. Yeah.
As a bookkeeper, how do you maintain your work life balance, especially during busy seasons?
If you get out of the house, I have dogs, take them out for a walk, make sure that I take that break when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. Take that break, get out of the house, go on a walk. When spring rolls around, I love to be outside in my garden. So if I just even take 10-15 minutes to go outside in my bare feet, to walk through the grass, or just take that break, and it's hard in the digital age, especially for those of us entrepreneurs working from home, to separate, that balance between work and life. You just got to make sure that you pick a stopping point and stop and step away from your computer and don't touch it again until it's this time that you start your day. It's important to do those things.
I agree with you on that. I work from home sometimes and it's hard to separate the two. And then I just like have to leave the whole house entirely because I'm like, I can't do this. I need a
Yeah,
break.
like when I go on vacation, I do not bring my computer with me because if I do, I will work, you know, and so I have to leave it at home so I can get that break away from work.
I love that. So I know you mentioned that you have a garden. Is there any other passion projects or hobbies of yours outside of that that helps you recharge?
Well, I love my garden. I love planting flowers. And if I'm not working, that's where you're going to find me, is in my garden. I'm also at the weird age now where shelling at the beach is super fun. 5 years ago, I would have called myself a nerd for liking to do this, but we like to take breaks that, every couple of months and go to the beach and go shelling. We love to go to the best shells so far because I haven't been everywhere, right? So far, we love to go to Cape Lookout, and that's where you find like the big conch shells, and shelling is a lot of fun. And then I like to read. I like to read a lot of dystopian novels. That's what I like to read. Yeah, I like to read the young adult dystopian novels. Those are fun.
I love that you like going shelling because you're absolutely right. You get different things at different beaches. In Venice, Florida, there's an entire area that's just shark teeth, and you don't really get many shells. You should
That's
check
so
that out.
cool.
It's so awesome. It's so awesome that they have a business out there on the pier called Sharkies on the Pier.
That's
So
neat. In November, actually, I think it was December, we were at the beach, Nag's Head, and a whale was beached, and that was really neat to see. That's not something that you see very often, and
mm-mm.
so that was very neat to see. We stayed there the whole day watching them, do their thing, the scientists out there, and asking questions and finding out about that. That was really neat.
If you love that, you should go to Sarasota and go to Moat Marine. They've got it's aquarium, obviously lab too, but they've got this place where you can go and you learn about them, but you could touch them too. Like the
Oh
sea
yeah,
urchins
that's
and
neat.
like yeah, it's so cool. So I just love ocean life. I think it's so cool and interesting. I love learning about it.
I know, like when I finally get to retire, that's where I want to do it at the coast. I love the beach. I could sit on the beach all day. And also, if I just have a book and sit on the beach, that's like heaven to me.
Absolutely. You should just think about buying a beach house.
I know, I should.
That's the next
I
thing is
should.
tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, so you can find me at www.designatedbookkeeper.com. I like transparency, so there you will see my pricing. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me from there. I think my phone number's on there. You can also follow me on social media. I haven't been doing a good job of posting here lately. You can see some of my historical stuff. I need to get back on there and post more. It's Designated Bookkeeper LLC. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Designated Bookkeeper LLC.
And we will link all of that with this episode so that you guys can follow and like and subscribe to her as well. All right. Well, thank you so much for all of your knowledge. I really appreciate it. You did great on rapid fire. It's our first time doing it. So thank you for doing that with me.
Oh,
And
that's a great idea.
want to add it
To
in.
do on all your
Awesome.
podcasts. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming to another exciting episode of Down Home Dirt. We'll see you next Tuesday. Don't forget to like and subscribe.